All right, hello. My name is Corey Graham, and this is my code review for the CS 499 capstone. And the project I'm going to be analyzing is actually a project I developed myself. It is a physique tracker using SQLite as the main database. So let's go ahead and break down what this system is designed to do first. So the best way to start this off is to show you guys exactly what it does. So let's go ahead and hit play. So it says, hello, welcome to my physique tracker. What I had done was I had started the code to, instead of it just spitting out everything, it was going to spit a small string out and then pause for time and then spit out the rest. The reason I designed it this way was because currently this is exclusively a back end. The design was to make it able to where a user can make a selection as to what they want to do. So this physique tracker, what you do is you log your body measurements as you are trying to either gain muscle or lose weight, whatever your fitness goals might be, using this system to help catalog all your information to be used later on. So here it says, please make a selection. So first and foremost, we need to select our database. If we decide we don't want to do a database first, we're going to get a message to say, please enter in a name for option 1. So it's telling us to use option 1 and to show you I covered my bases. If I just type in my name, Corey, it's going to say an invalid input because this one currently only accepts integers as it's the entry. So let's go ahead and select database. So the one I use for testing the software is a database called test. So the code scrolls, what it's designed to do is it takes the name and it finds the associated table in SQL using the name given. And I can spell it with caps or lowercase, it doesn't matter. I have it to where no matter what input you put in, it will automatically change it to be caps. So you'll always get the same database no matter what sizing you're using. So right now we've opened up the database successfully. That's good. So we can choose option 2 to read entries, and it spits out the date and all of the measurements for that. Following that, we can log a new entry, and I'm not going to put in real values, but I'll just go ahead and do it real quick. So logging measurements for today's date, and hit enter. Now put in your weight. I'm just going to use 5s. 5, enter your chest, left arm, right arm, navel, waist, left leg, right leg, and it's been logged. So I can actually go back to read entries, and we should be able to see that as well. Hold on, why did that not work? Well, it's worked before, so let me see here what is going on. That looks like something I will have to fix. Oh, I ran this before, and I did it today. So that is something I'm going to have to work on, is multiple inputs for the same day. But they're using the same primary key, so it's defaulting to this main one. So if I use update entries, I could change it to be 5s. So I'm going to change, actually, you know what? I should be able to go backtrack a date. So I'm going to go ahead and do the day before, 2025. And yesterday was the 11th. So no entries for that date, so I'm not going to be able to log in for that one, but I should be able to do it for today's date. So let's do update new entries, 2025-09-12. Okay, it's going to ask me to enter a new height. I'm going to say 5, or new weight, 5, 5, 5, 5, 5. Repeating. And when I say read new entries, it should be all 5s. Perfect. So, and I'm also able to delete the entry by going 2025-09-12. Entry was deleted successfully, so let's check. No entries found. So this is what the code does. Now the way it is, I will do the the checklist that we were given now. So, does the code completely and correctly implement the design? I believe it does. The design is meant to catalog all inputs into the database. As you can see here, we have our menu, the options it gives us to make our decisions. We have establishing the connection. So when we enter in the name, if there is no name existing, it will create a database. Otherwise, it will find the name, the database associated with that name, and it will create all the necessary columns and be able to just effectuate any changes, make sure everything operates successfully. As you can see, I implement try and catch blocks for that to make sure that every time it opens up correctly. Does the code conform to any pertinent coding standards? The coding standards I adhered to were mostly the ones taught to me by SNHU. They did not adhere to any specific company standards or anything along those lines. So unless there are specific extra criteria, I did follow the SNHU standard, which is making sure that, this is the case of Java for non-constants, it is, I believe it's called camel, when you have the first part of your variable named and the second word being in capital. I also made sure to put extra spaces in between functions, and I think functions is the wrong word, in between methods, because so it's able to read better. So you see a chunk here, and then whenever you see a larger space here, it goes into the next method. All of it with the main method being on the bottom, so that when the operation starts, it doesn't have to start and then read everything and then go back. Instead, it just goes through all the methods in the system, and it can just automatically recall those as quickly as possible. I know this goes without saying, but this was written in Java. Let's see here. Is the code well structured, consistent in style, and consistently formatted? Again, I believe so, because I adhered to those SNHU standards. I adhered to making sure I use white space to help with readability, to make sure that I used methods instead of having repeating code, which I think is another standard that goes on here. Are there any uncalled for or unneeded procedures or any unreachable code? No. When I was designing this, I made sure that each method, each variable, and each operator was used effectively. And if it wasn't, I made sure it was deleted or commented out. And actually, I can show you an example. So I'm going to scroll all the way down here. If you keep your eyes to the left, where these numbers are, I'm going to scroll all the way up, and you're going to see that there are no warnings for any of this code. Ready? 3, 2, 1, scrolling up. No warnings whatsoever. Now, the part I commented out is here. I will touch on this a little bit later in my code review, but needless to say, this menu option was not used in this moment. I did not have the ability to display metrics at this time. So that's why this part was commented out, because it was unused. Are there any leftover stubs or test routines in the code? There are not currently any test routines in this code. Can any code be replaced by calls or to external reusable components or library functions? I need to investigate this further, because there is something I think could be called back to a function instead of it being repeated. And each of the main methods, so if I scroll all the way down to the bottom, you see here in my processing of the menu options right here, again, there's a try and catch block. Selecting your input for the main menu that you saw at the beginning, it calls to either creating the creating the database, reading the update, updating the database, reading the database, or deleting the database, or deleting the table entirely. Those all start out very similar, each one. So let me go ahead and show you that. So let's go ahead and scroll up here. So delete entry. So this is the one where we decide, hey, I want to delete a specific entry. The start is always very similar. We have the string URL being established, which is this JDBC SQLite plus the database name, and that's in every single method, and followed by something a specific output. Now, this here combined with the call to have a query and the try get the connection, that is something we can find in each one. So here's the update. Again, string URL, the specific message, and the query with this right here. Now it's a little different. So that's why I have to do a little more research on it, is because if it's just slightly different each time, it may not be worth the hassle of trying to figure out how to put it in a function. But if it's all similar enough, I might be able to pull it off. But just because I can doesn't necessarily mean I should. So that's why I need to investigate further in this. Let's see here. Are there any blocks of repeating code that could be condensed in a single procedure? I think that's what I confused with in the last step. So I'm going to go ahead and skip that one. Is storage use efficient? As far as I'm aware, I use storage as efficiently as I could. However, I'm not sure of where I can alter that. I am using Java. I am not using C++, so I don't really have the option to really alter memory and storage. So I believe I'm in the clear, but it may come to light that it's not quite so. Are symbolics used rather than magic numbers, constants, or string constants? I use no constants in this code because everything that is put in is dependent upon the user. If the entries don't make sense, well, that's up to the user. I mean, if you put in, for example, for weight, if I put in I weigh 2 pounds, other than small, like infants or anything like that, no one's going to weigh 2 pounds. There's no real catch for that. But, I mean, that's all dependent on the user. Are any modules excessively complex and should be restructured to split into multiple routines? Nothing is super complex. Basically, when each function is called, for the most part, it is either to prevent redundancy, or it is to say, hey, we're going to establish connection, we're going to process the query, and we're going to submit a all clear message, and then we're going to return back to main menu. That is the fundamental basis of these methods. It's based on the CRUD method: create, read, update, delete. That's all it is. It's very simple, but it just shows that I'm able to it shows that I'm going to be able to do basically the bare minimum. Let's see here. Are any modules excessively complex? Okay. Documentation. Is the code clearly and adequately documented with easy to maintain commenting style? This is something I'm going to have to fix, I believe. My comments are very short, very brief, very small. I believe they work for me, but if someone else comes to my code, it may not be so. So what I need to change is putting more comments in this section here, a larger comments, like breaking down what this method is supposed to do. I do say, my reasonings for doing certain things. Establishes which database will be accessed. We will access during the variable name URL. Right here, a copy of that same comment right here. Let's see here, and log entry. No comments are up here, But here, automatically use today's date. That's what this line of code is to do. Get user input, clear scanner, bind and insert. It's a very just kind of basic. I believe I can do better my commenting, and so as I go throughout this, that's one thing that's one thing I'll consider doing, is to make better comments. Are all variables properly defined? Are all variables properly defined with meaningful, consistent, and clear names? I believe so. With my code, I try and make it to where no matter what variable I use, anyone's going to be able to understand for the most part. Obviously, you still need to read the code. You still need to understand how these variables are used, but there's nothing random. It's not like I just call the variable random or something silly along those lines. Let's go here. Right here, the variable for the connection is called con, for connection. Statement is shortened to STMT statement. Let's see here. With these float variables right here, they are used for what their actual inputs are for the columns: weight, chest, left arm, navel, waist, left leg, right leg. Let's see here. Is there any other examples I can use? Other than query and date, and URL, every variable is very clearly defined, and it's hard to mistake one for another, and it's also hard to misinterpret what these variables are meant to do and where they're meant to go. Arithmetic operations. Does your code avoid comparing floating point numbers for equality? Yes, there is no equivalencies done in my code for floating numbers. The only equivalencies that you're going to find is for exclusively integers, and that's to process the menu. Does the code systematically prevent routing areas? I do use quite a bit of try and catch blocks with catching mismatch input. So if it's expecting an integer and you put in a character, you're going to get an error message. If you put in a string, you're getting an error message. If you put in a float or anything along those lines, another error message, and it will just say, hey, it has to be an integer from values 1 to 9, or along those lines. And if I'm outside the range, then it's going to say that option is not available. Please select of these options. Does your code avoid additions and subtractions on numbers with greatly different magnitudes? Yes, there is no arithmetic operations for addition or subtraction currently in my code. Does your code avoid, I read that one, are divisors tested for zero or noise? I have not divided. There's no division or multiplication currently in my code. I will touch on those in a minute toward the end when I'm explaining my enhancements, but for now, suffice it to say no. Alright, loops and branches. Are all loops, branches, and logic constructs complete, correct, and properly nested? I believe so, so let me go ahead and show you kind of the loop that I'm using. So I'm using a while loop here, and my input right here, so initially it's put as a -1, so it avoids kind of any mistake. So we enter in the while loop at the start of the code, and it's while we have selected that input as not 9. So 9 is what will break us out of the loop. Well, while the input is not 9, we will consistently come back here. And again, I mentioned this before, but if someone tries to put in a character, a string, or a float to try and get that, they're going to get the input mismatch error. And it's going to spit that error message out, and then we'll go back through the loop again. Our most common cases tested first in else if chains. I believe I can touch on this one with all. The second one, are all cases covered in any if else if or case blocks, including else default clauses? Yes. Yes, all options are covered. So again, this falls into this loop. So again, this try catch block. Here we have if input is 1, else if 2, else if 3, 4, 5, 6, and then just a plain else at the end. And then if else if input is 9, oh, excuse me, I just realized I called this else from an interior if else statement. That is, excuse me, this if statement, and there's an else statement. My apologies. Else if 6, and then right here, else if the input is equal to 9, it breaks. Then here's that final else, and then it says not a valid option. Please go back. Are loops termination conditions obvious and invariably achieved? Yes. So when you select input is 9, first and foremost, it will go through this and it will break the while loop anyway. However, let's say this breaks, the while loop will still say, hey, input is 9, and so thus it cancels it out. So there's two ways that this can end, and with one failure point, I feel like it's pretty secure. I could just put in while true, and it will do the same. It will do the same thing, only there is no secondary catch. So I don't like putting any amount of chance in code if I can avoid it. So that's why I put input is not equal to 9, because it gives me two ways to break the code instead of one. Can any statement that are enclosed within loops be placed outside loops? So this being the only loop, and for it to be just processing a user's experience, I don't believe this can be placed outside the loop. Does the code in the loop avoid manipulating the index variable or using it upon exit from the loop? I'm not using any indexes in this, so I believe so. Defensive programming. Are indexes, pointers, and subscripts tested against arrays, record, or file bounds? Again, I'm not using arrays, and there's no indexes, there's no pointers, and no subscripts. Are imported data and input arguments tested for validity and completeness? I'm not really importing any external data. The reason I was using SQLite is to keep the database on the user's computer self-contained. Are all output variables assigned? Yes. Are the correct data operated on each statement? I believe so, yes. Is every memory allocated, deallocated? I have not allocated memory, so that's not something I have to worry about, but for the sake of this checklist, yes. Are timeouts or error traps used for external device access? I don't think this currently applies to this code, but we'll talk a little bit more about that and the necessary components as we get into the enhancements. Are files checked for existence before attempting to access them? Actually, yes. When you start here, when we establish the connection, first and foremost, it checks for the database with your name. If it finds it, it will it will establish its connection. If it does not find it, then it creates a new database with your name. Are all files and devices left in the correct state upon program termination? This is asking, am I closing it? So here we can see that the statement is closed, but only in this function. So when it calls it, it opens it and closes it again. So what I tried to do with this code is each time, let's see here. So that one, it opens and closes. Let's see here what I did at the end. Okay, yes, I closed the scanner. But now that I'm looking at this code, I don't believe I closed the database each time. I think it's left open. Huh. Yeah, I think I leave the database open each time. So I just keep on calling for it to be open and I never close it. So I'm wondering if I never close it, are these establishments still necessary? Huh. Well, at the end, I should add in a function to close all databases, but for now, I think that's one thing I need to improve on. Now, let's go ahead and get to the enhancements. This part will be very quick. I plan on using this code for all 3 enhancements. So as you can see, this is a back end only. So for the software design aspect, the enhancement I want to add is a front end. So the way I go about doing this, there's a couple of ways I can go. I can use Spring Boot to help me bring this Java backend into a front end. I'll be using JavaScript, HTML, and CSS. This will require me to learn those 3 better. We did have a full stack development course, but if I'm being fair and honest, I don't feel like I learned much in that course, not due to the professor or the course material. It just felt like, hey, do steps A, B, and C, so I'm gonna have to learn how to do that. Establish the Spring Boot, and then apply the appropriate JavaScript, HTML, and C+, and the CSS code. Add metrics to satisfy the algorithms, data structures, and also the arithmetic parts of the checklist. There will be a section of my front end to display the metrics. Overall progress, weight loss, average weights, average sizes for different body parts. I want the front end to obviously make this appealing, and I want the arithmetics and the metrics to be displayed, so that the user, when they log in, they will be able to see their progress. And for the databases, this one currently runs on SQLite. SQLite is fantastic when it is an isolated program, but because I'm going to put this on a front end, I'm going to have to alter the database from a SQLite to something more akin to MySQL, which means I'll also have to add in a security for logging in. When it comes to logging in, I also need to make sure I put in security, prevents SQL injections. I need to protect against buffer overflows and other points of concern that arise with that. I believe that covers everything for this video. Thank you guys so much for reviewing my code with me, and I hope everything goes well. Take care.